everyone, this is Sarah with sewingpartsonline.com and welcome back to our sewing mini series. In this episode, we're going to learn how to attach facing to a neckline. The first thing you want to do, assuming you have all your pieces cut out and marked, is apply some iron-on interfacing. The interfacing provides structure and it will help keep the facing flat on the inside of your garment. The interfacing should be the same weight as your fabric. So in the case of this muslin, I'm using a medium weight fusible woven interfacing. Now, when you look closely at the interfacing, you'll see one side has this bubble, pebble-like look to it, and that's the adhesive side. Flip the bubble side down onto the wrong side of your neckline facing. So in my case, the wrong side of this muslin. Put a pressing cloth over everything and press with your iron. Hold in place for a few seconds, lift up and reposition. You usually only need to do this for like 5 seconds at a time. You don't want to overheat because it'll compromise the adhesive. Then just check it and make sure it's fused well. Repeat on all pieces of your facing. Now sew all the facing pieces together at the shoulder seam. Make sure to match up your notches and then press the seam open. With right sides together, pin the facing to the neckline, again making sure notches are matched up. Go to your machine and sew with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, unless it's otherwise noted in your pattern. When you get to the V, follow along the marking lines that you transferred from your pattern pieces. The lines are here because you can't really see the seam allowance guide when you're sewing into the sharp angle of the V-neck. Pivot at the point and continue sewing. It's crucial these seam allowances are straight and accurate. It's also recommended you reinforce that deep V angle with a second layer of stitching, and you'll see why here in a minute. Now, cut into the V as close to the stitches as possible without actually cutting the stitch. I'm talking like 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch away from the stitch. Grade the rest of the seam allowance by trimming it to about 1/4 of an inch. This reduces bulk. Now for the understitch. The understitch helps the facing stay on the inside of the garment. It's a very narrow stitch that basically sews the seam allowance to the facing. So as best as you can, finger press or actually press the neckline seam over towards the facing. And sew it down using a very narrow stitch. The stitches will only show on the facing, not on the fabric shell, aka your actual neckline that everyone's going to see. Be extra careful when you get to that V again. Pivot and turn for a nice clean finish. When you're finished, flip the facing to the inside of your garment and give it a good press. I like to use best press to give it a nice crisp finish. So I hope that this was helpful. If you have any comments or questions, be sure to leave them in the comment section below. If you just want to come and hang out with our sewing community, visit us online at sewingpartsonline.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/sewingpartsonline, Twitter at sewingparts, Google+, Pinterest, Instagram, we're everywhere, and be sure to subscribe by hitting that button below for next week's sewing video.